Hello guys, Xeno here, and I thought I'd make a short series of Witcher 3 videos, seeing as how I've been playing so much of it recently, and I thought I'd start things off with a main build that I've been running on Deathmarch Difficulty. I've spent a lot of time experimenting with builds, and the thing I love about this game is there are so many ways you can approach the combat and really come up with some interesting and unique builds, though this is the build I ended up completing my first Deathmarch Difficulty run through with. It's primarily focused around signs and sign intensity, with little emphasis on melee damage, but there are some things thrown in to substitute for that, which we'll get into first by looking at the trait lines. For the sake of build organization, I won't explain the order in which to pick these things up, so you can decide for yourself in how you want to go about doing that, but these are the traits that you want to end up with. So to start things off, we've got Rage Management and Adrenaline Burst. As this is a signs build, these two traits synergize well together and allow you to use your signs very frequently with rare to little downtime. Next, to make up for the lack of melee focus, we're taking Poisoned Blades, which combined with our gear, which I'll get into later, will allow us to put out a fair amount of pressure with damage over time during periods where casting signs isn't as efficient as meleeing, which to be fair is quite rare until the endgame bosses. For our signs, let's start with Igni, and we're taking Igni Intensity, Melt Armor and Pyromaniac, which will allow us to permanently weaken enemies' armor and immediately apply a burn when cast. This means we should always be using Igni as our opener, no matter the enemy type, as to make use of these two traits. Igni of course works better on some enemies more than others, but with these two traits you can gain an advantage on all enemies that you hit with it from the start. As a side note, once you're into the latter stages of the game and have everything else in this build unlocked, you can swap out Igni Intensity to another trait of your choice, maybe a melee focus trait, as it will be a more valuable trade-off once you start stacking as much sign intensity as we have now. Next, we're focusing on the Ard sign, without a doubt the most overlooked sign when it comes to popular builds, and the traits we want for this sign are Far-Reaching, Intensity and Shockwave. This will give us various uses from our Ard sign depending on the enemy type. In most cases it will provide us with a strong stagger, which will allow us an opening to attack. It will consistently provide a small white damage hit with every cast, and on certain enemies provide a vital knockdown which will allow us to follow up with an execute. This is invaluable on Deathmarch Difficulty, as it means we can pretty much eliminate enemies with full HP just from a successful knockdown with a single hit. It even works on certain monster contracts, making quick work of what would otherwise be a tricky encounter. Lastly, we're going to need to have some defensive and crowd control traits, and for that we're focusing on Quen and Axii. Quen is probably the most important sign when it comes to Deathmarch Difficulty, as there are many instances where you can be one shot by an enemy, and Quen will allow you to completely eat that damage should you mess up. Synergized with our fast casting build, you could theoretically just face tank, dodge and melee with this build, which is something that you will be doing a little bit of towards the end of the game. For Quen, we're taking Exploding Shield and Active Shield, which will provide us with further stagger and knockdown potential, as well as the ability to recover health whilst maintaining our shield under fire. Finally, we're running with Delusion in the Axii tree, which will allow us to cast Axii very quickly at incoming attackers without the danger of being struck. If it fails, it will apply a stagger, which will allow us to compensate by following up should we fail to hit with it. It also provides a nice passive whilst working your way through the story, because it's got that dialogue buff, but it isn't essential to the build. I'd say this trait along with the Igni Intensity trait are the most flexible traits should you want to further customize the build. For our armor, we want to run with a light armor set so we can spam our signs as often as possible. For this reason I'm running with a feline set. The weapons are completely up to you, though I've chosen to run feline for everything just for the sake of aesthetics, but there are many good weapons to choose from that fit perfectly into the build. I recommend something that adds damage over time, as again it compensates for the lack of melee damage. For runes and glyphs, I like to focus around Ard Intensity and Chance to Stagger. As for potions, I find Thunderbolt and Petri's Filter work as general rules, but obviously you'll want to adapt to whatever is best for the situation. Same regarding oils, though I always use Superior Hangman's Venom on my Steel Sword. That's pretty much the build, guys, so remember the build is all about knowing which sign to use for what situation, or knowing how to rotate around them together. So for example, prepping with Quen, opening with Igni, switching to Ard for the stagger and knockdown, moving for the execute and using Axii for CC if and when needed. Remember to sit in your Quen shield to heal up after taking heavy damage. As with all builds, when it comes to the high difficulties, you'll want to know how to dodge and parry effectively. When it comes to melee, the typical safe zone I find is 2 to 3 quick attacks, parry or dodge and repeat. Okay guys, hope you enjoyed the video. The next one will probably be a more melee focused build, and I'll also be making some videos focused around expansions. So if you're not subscribed, consider doing so for more Witcher 3 content coming soon. Okay guys, until next time, take care.